First, let's look at Britain's new Labour government and its fresh approach to the economy. First, let's look at Britain's new Labour government and its fresh approach to the economy. On July the 20th, Andy Burnham took office as Prime Minister, replacing Sir Keir Starmer after a sharp political shift. On July the 20th, Andy Burnham took office as Prime Minister, replacing Sir Keir Starmer after a sharp political shift. His very first moves focused straight on immediate household bills, cutting value-added tax on energy from 5% down to 0, and capping bus fares across England at £2. His very first moves focused straight on immediate household bills, cutting value-added tax on energy from 5% down to 0, and capping bus fares across England at £2. On paper, offering quick relief makes obvious sense. On paper, offering quick relief makes obvious sense. Britons have spent 4 years dealing with tight household budgets, and the national mood has been gloomy for a long time. Britons have spent 4 years dealing with tight household budgets, and the national mood has been gloomy for a long time. The new Prime Minister wants people to feel that the long squeeze on their incomes is finally easing. The new Prime Minister wants people to feel that the long squeeze on their incomes is finally easing. But when you look past the headlines, these initial policy choices raise serious questions about fiscal discipline. But when you look past the headlines, these initial policy choices raise serious questions about fiscal discipline. To understand why, we have to look at the actual economic picture. To understand why, we have to look at the actual economic picture. Inflation in Britain has already fallen to 2.6%, so soaring prices aren't the primary threat to household finances. Inflation in Britain has already fallen to 2.6%, so soaring prices aren't the primary threat to household finances. The real problem right now is that wages have stalled. The real problem right now is that wages have stalled. Yet instead of tackling long-term growth, the government chose short-term measures. Yet instead of tackling long-term growth, the government chose short-term measures. Capping bus fares and cutting energy taxes will certainly help passengers and homeowners this year, but both policies are scheduled to expire within 12 months. Capping bus fares and cutting energy taxes will certainly help passengers and homeowners this year, but both policies are scheduled to expire within 12 months. Local tax discounts for certain pubs and bars offer a similar brief respite. Local tax discounts for certain pubs and bars offer a similar brief respite. None of these moves carry a clear, permanent source of funding. None of these moves carry a clear, permanent source of funding. That contrast between short-term spending and long-term discipline is already creating friction within the government itself. That contrast between short-term spending and long-term discipline is already creating friction within the government itself. In his first days in office, the Prime Minister carried out a major cabinet reshuffle, removing several senior figures who favoured deregulation, technology investment, and house building as the main path to economic growth. In his first days in office, the Prime Minister carried out a major cabinet reshuffle, removing several senior figures who favoured deregulation, technology investment, and house building as the main path to economic growth. Rachel Reeves was replaced as Chancellor by John Healey, a seasoned Treasury insider who now has to balance these popular spending cuts against a very tight public budget. Rachel Reeves was replaced as Chancellor by John Healey, a seasoned Treasury insider who now has to balance these popular spending cuts against a very tight public budget. So the central question is whether this government can turn quick relief into lasting stability. So the central question is whether this government can turn quick relief into lasting stability. In British political history, the first 100 days usually tell you everything you need to know about a leader's direction. In British political history, the first 100 days usually tell you everything you need to know about a leader's direction. Past governments that achieved permanent reforms, like giving independence to the central bank or reshaping local governance, acted almost immediately. Past governments that achieved permanent reforms, like giving independence to the central bank or reshaping local governance, acted almost immediately. When leaders hesitate early on, their ambitions tend to drift away. When leaders hesitate early on, their ambitions tend to drift away. Right now, the heavy lifting has been postponed. Right now, the heavy lifting has been postponed. The Prime Minister has promised to present a 10-year plan in the autumn, leaving major structural issues on hold. The Prime Minister has promised to present a 10-year plan in the autumn, leaving major structural issues on hold. Tough decisions on reforming social care for the elderly remain unanswered. Tough decisions on reforming social care for the elderly remain unanswered. Even his favourite project, devolving power from central government to English regions, has produced little concrete detail beyond opening a regional office in Manchester. Even his favourite project, devolving power from central government to English regions, has produced little concrete detail beyond opening a regional office in Manchester. Here is the bottom line. Here is the bottom line. Lowering an energy bill or capping a bus fare brings immediate cheer to commuters, but it doesn't fix the underlying strength of the economy. Lowering an energy bill or capping a bus fare brings immediate cheer to commuters, but it doesn't fix the underlying strength of the economy. Small temporary subsidies buy goodwill for a few months, but eventually ministers have to decide how to pay for them without stretching the national budget to its limits. Small temporary subsidies buy goodwill for a few months, but eventually ministers have to decide how to pay for them without stretching the national budget to its limits. Now, for our second topic today, we leave Westminster behind and turn to the global race for artificial intelligence. Now, for our second topic today, we leave Westminster behind and turn to the global race for artificial intelligence. Or, more specifically, a rather curious turn in how China is trying to win it. Or, more specifically, a rather curious turn in how China is trying to win it. If you were to take a taxi ride in eastern Switzerland early next year, there is a good chance the driverless technology navigating the Alpine roads will be Chinese. If you were to take a taxi ride in eastern Switzerland early next year, there is a good chance the driverless technology navigating the Alpine roads will be Chinese. More than 70 Chinese artificial intelligence companies have already established operations abroad, deploying driverless cabs, delivery vehicles, and software across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. More than 70 Chinese artificial intelligence companies have already established operations abroad, deploying driverless cabs, delivery vehicles, and software across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Meanwhile, major American rivals like Waymo have mostly stayed focused on their home market. Meanwhile, major American rivals like Waymo have mostly stayed focused on their home market. On the surface, this looks like a straightforward attempt at global tech dominance. On the surface, this looks like a straightforward attempt at global tech dominance. But look a little closer, and the real push comes from a very awkward problem back home. But look a little closer, and the real push comes from a very awkward problem back home. Making money on artificial intelligence inside China has turned out to be remarkably hard. Making money on artificial intelligence inside China has turned out to be remarkably hard. Chinese consumers are notoriously reluctant to pay for chatbot subscriptions. Chinese consumers are notoriously reluctant to pay for chatbot subscriptions. Chinese companies spend less than a tenth of what American firms do on software budgets. Chinese companies spend less than a tenth of what American firms do on software budgets. And when it comes to driverless taxis, an oversupply of human cab drivers keeps domestic fares extremely low. And when it comes to driverless taxis, an oversupply of human cab drivers keeps domestic fares extremely low. A 10-kilometer taxi ride in the Chinese city of Wuhan costs around 23 yuan, which is about $3.40. A 10-kilometer taxi ride in the Chinese city of Wuhan costs around 23 yuan, which is about $3.40. But in a Swiss canton like Saint Gallen, that same 10-kilometer trip commands 44 Swiss francs, or more than $50. But in a Swiss canton like Saint Gallen, that same 10-kilometer trip commands 44 Swiss francs, or more than $50. The math is simple enough. The math is simple enough. Chinese tech firms are heading overseas because foreign passengers actually pay proper money. Chinese tech firms are heading overseas because foreign passengers actually pay proper money. Yet there is an even deeper reason Beijing is eager for these companies to go global. Yet there is an even deeper reason Beijing is eager for these companies to go global. It has to do with public stability. It has to do with public stability. The Chinese government is determined to close the technology gap with America, but it is equally terrified of anything that might cause social unrest. The Chinese government is determined to close the technology gap with America, but it is equally terrified of anything that might cause social unrest. Replacing human workers with software is a touchy subject everywhere, but in China, it carries real political risk. Replacing human workers with software is a touchy subject everywhere, but in China, it carries real political risk. Driverless cabs have already sparked small domestic protests. Local regulators have paused some fleet licenses, and courts have begun ruling in favour of workers who lost jobs to automated systems. Driverless cabs have already sparked small domestic protests. Local regulators have paused some fleet licenses, and courts have begun ruling in favour of workers who lost jobs to automated systems. So exporting artificial intelligence offers Beijing a neat exit strategy. So exporting artificial intelligence offers Beijing a neat exit strategy. It allows Chinese firms to make money abroad while exporting the social friction and job displacement that comes with automation. It allows Chinese firms to make money abroad while exporting the social friction and job displacement that comes with automation. Naturally, Washington is watching all this with real anxiety. Naturally, Washington is watching all this with real anxiety. American officials realize that every foreign country running on Chinese software and data infrastructure is one less customer for American tech. American officials realize that every foreign country running on Chinese software and data infrastructure is one less customer for American tech. To counter this, the United States has started financing overseas sales of trusted American technology. To counter this, the United States has started financing overseas sales of trusted American technology. But American lawmakers are caught in their own tangle. But American lawmakers are caught in their own tangle. Congress is currently weighing new legislation to prevent rivals like China from renting American cloud computing power through back doors. Congress is currently weighing new legislation to prevent rivals like China from renting American cloud computing power through back doors. The intention is clear enough, but if the rules are written too broadly, they risk locking out allies as well. The intention is clear enough, but if the rules are written too broadly, they risk locking out allies as well. If getting access to American computing power becomes too bureaucratic, foreign governments may simply take the cheaper, readily available option from Beijing. If getting access to American computing power becomes too bureaucratic, foreign governments may simply take the cheaper, readily available option from Beijing. So the battle for artificial intelligence is shifting. So the battle for artificial intelligence is shifting. It is no longer just about who builds the smartest machine in a lab. It is no longer just about who builds the smartest machine in a lab. It is about who installs the physical rails, the data networks, and the daily software in city streets around the world. It is about who installs the physical rails, the data networks, and the daily software in city streets around the world. And at the moment, China is finding that the easiest place to build that future is far away from home. And at the moment, China is finding that the easiest place to build that future is far away from home. Now for our third topic, moving from artificial intelligence to global security. Now for our third topic, moving from artificial intelligence to global security. Recent conflict in the Middle East has forced Gulf countries to quietly rethink one of their most important relationships, specifically their ties with Beijing. Recent conflict in the Middle East has forced Gulf countries to quietly rethink one of their most important relationships, specifically their ties with Beijing. For years, leaders across the Gulf had come to see China as a constructive partner. For years, leaders across the Gulf had come to see China as a constructive partner. It seemed a reasonable expectation. It seemed a reasonable expectation. In 2024, trade between China and the Gulf Cooperation Council reached nearly $300 billion. In 2024, trade between China and the Gulf Cooperation Council reached nearly $300 billion. That was more than the region's trade with the European Union and the United States combined. That was more than the region's trade with the European Union and the United States combined. Before the war broke out in February, Gulf countries were exporting nearly 4 million barrels of crude oil to China every day. Before the war broke out in February, Gulf countries were exporting nearly 4 million barrels of crude oil to China every day. In fact, back in 2023, about 36% of China's crude oil imports came from the region. In fact, back in 2023, about 36% of China's crude oil imports came from the region. The connection went well beyond simple trade. The connection went well beyond simple trade. Sovereign wealth funds from the Gulf were opening offices in Beijing and Hong Kong, while the Chinese population living in the Arabian Peninsula grew to over 500,000. Sovereign wealth funds from the Gulf were opening offices in Beijing and Hong Kong, while the Chinese population living in the Arabian Peninsula grew to over 500,000. On paper, China also seemed uniquely positioned to help keep the peace. On paper, China also seemed uniquely positioned to help keep the peace. Beijing holds considerable diplomatic leverage over Tehran, largely because American sanctions left Iran reliant on Chinese economic support. Beijing holds considerable diplomatic leverage over Tehran, largely because American sanctions left Iran reliant on Chinese economic support. In 2021, China signed a 25-year cooperation agreement with Iran. In 2021, China signed a 25-year cooperation agreement with Iran. Two years later, Beijing helped broker the deal that restored diplomatic ties between Saudi Arabia and Iran, holding follow-up meetings as recently as December 2025. 2 years later, Beijing helped broker the deal that restored diplomatic ties between Saudi Arabia and Iran, holding follow-up meetings as recently as December 2025. Gulf governments naturally hoped that as China became more dependent on their energy and capital, it would use its leverage in Tehran to restrain Iranian aggression. Gulf governments naturally hoped that as China became more dependent on their energy and capital, it would use its leverage in Tehran to restrain Iranian aggression. The war in Iran shattered those hopes. The war in Iran shattered those hopes. When conflict erupted, Beijing adopted a cautious wait-and-see approach. When conflict erupted, Beijing adopted a cautious wait-and-see approach. It showed no inclination to use its influence over Tehran to contain the fighting or protect Gulf states from retaliatory strikes. It showed no inclination to use its influence over Tehran to contain the fighting or protect Gulf states from retaliatory strikes. That inaction has created a deep sense of frustration. That inaction has created a deep sense of frustration. Gulf states were already upset with the United States for starting a conflict that disrupted energy markets and left their infrastructure exposed. Gulf states were already upset with the United States for starting a conflict that disrupted energy markets and left their infrastructure exposed. But the war made one thing clear. But the war made one thing clear. China has no intention of stepping in to keep the Gulf safe. China has no intention of stepping in to keep the Gulf safe. Beijing lacks a vision for regional security, and it firmly believes that avoiding security commitments is the smartest path forward. Beijing lacks a vision for regional security, and it firmly believes that avoiding security commitments is the smartest path forward. So where does that leave the region? So where does that leave the region? China will remain a major buyer of oil, a partner in green technology, and a key commercial ally. China will remain a major buyer of oil, a partner in green technology, and a key commercial ally. But commercial ties are not a defense shield. But commercial ties are not a defense shield. Gulf leaders are realizing that while Beijing is happy to buy their oil, it will not act as their bodyguard. Gulf leaders are realizing that while Beijing is happy to buy their oil, it will not act as their bodyguard. They are left with an uncomfortable choice. They are left with an uncomfortable choice. They must either double down on a volatile United States that remains the only power capable of offering real protection, or search for new partners to replace the role they had hoped China would play. They must either double down on a volatile United States that remains the only power capable of offering real protection, or search for new partners to replace the role they had hoped China would play. It is a sobering reminder that economic weight does not automatically buy peace, especially when your biggest trading partner prefers to watch from the sidelines. It is a sobering reminder that economic weight does not automatically buy peace, especially when your biggest trading partner prefers to watch from the sidelines. Now, for our fourth story today, we turn from geopolitical shifts in the Gulf to a dilemma brewing in the world of high finance. Now, for our fourth story today, we turn from geopolitical shifts in the Gulf to a dilemma brewing in the world of high finance. It involves prediction markets, those online exchanges where people bet real money on future events, from interest rate decisions to election results. It involves prediction markets, those online exchanges where people bet real money on future events, from interest rate decisions to election results. If you have paid attention to financial news lately, you might have noticed these platforms are growing at a staggering pace. If you have paid attention to financial news lately, you might have noticed these platforms are growing at a staggering pace. In June 2026 alone, Kalshi processed $33 billion in trades, while its rival Polymarket handled over $14 billion across its platforms. In June 2026 alone, Kalshi processed $33 billion in trades, while its rival Polymarket handled over $14 billion across its platforms. Their founders are now seeking company valuations in the tens of billions. Their founders are now seeking company valuations in the tens of billions. Amateurs love them, and big Wall Street funds have even started tracking their odds to gauge public expectations. Amateurs love them, and big Wall Street funds have even started tracking their odds to gauge public expectations. Yet for all their sudden momentum, these exchanges face a fundamental problem. Yet for all their sudden momentum, these exchanges face a fundamental problem. They want to attract massive institutional investors who can use these markets to hedge real financial risk. They want to attract massive institutional investors who can use these markets to hedge real financial risk. But institutional managers will not put serious money on the line unless they are certain of two things: that the market is fair and that the rules of the bet are crystal clear. But institutional managers will not put serious money on the line unless they are certain of two things: that the market is fair and that the rules of the bet are crystal clear. At the moment, neither condition is guaranteed. At the moment, neither condition is guaranteed. Take the issue of market fairness. Take the issue of market fairness. On a traditional stock exchange, trading on private information is illegal. On a traditional stock exchange, trading on private information is illegal. On prediction markets, insider betting has become an awkward reality. On prediction markets, insider betting has become an awkward reality. Earlier this year, Kalshi caught an editor for a popular online video creator using private workplace knowledge to place winning bets. Earlier this year, Kalshi caught an editor for a popular online video creator using private workplace knowledge to place winning bets. In another case, a candidate running for governor in California was caught betting on his own election race. In another case, a candidate running for governor in California was caught betting on his own election race. When people with inside information can manipulate odds, ordinary traders lose confidence, and institutional investors simply walk away. When people with inside information can manipulate odds, ordinary traders lose confidence, and institutional investors simply walk away. Then there is the messy problem of contract resolution. Then there is the messy problem of contract resolution. When a bet finishes, who decides who won? When a bet finishes, who decides who won? The two biggest platforms handle this in very different ways, and both are struggling. The two biggest platforms handle this in very different ways, and both are struggling. Polymarket, which operates primarily on a cryptocurrency framework, relies on a decentralized voting system. Polymarket, which operates primarily on a cryptocurrency framework, relies on a decentralized voting system. When an outcome is disputed, holders of a specific digital token vote on how the contract should settle. When an outcome is disputed, holders of a specific digital token vote on how the contract should settle. On paper, letting a community vote sounds democratic. On paper, letting a community vote sounds democratic. In practice, it is easily manipulated. In practice, it is easily manipulated. Investigations have revealed that a small group of digital wallets controls a majority of those votes, and major traders frequently vote on the outcome of their own bets. Investigations have revealed that a small group of digital wallets controls a majority of those votes, and major traders frequently vote on the outcome of their own bets. Kalshi takes a more structured path. Kalshi takes a more structured path. It hires a team led by former university debate champions to draft precise rulebooks for every single trade. It hires a team led by former university debate champions to draft precise rulebooks for every single trade. But that small team is now trying to handle more than 10,000 active contracts a day, covering everything from congressional salaries to energy prices. But that small team is now trying to handle more than 10,000 active contracts a day, covering everything from congressional salaries to energy prices. In the rush to expand, ambiguous wording and typos have crept into contract rules, leading to bizarre settlements. In the rush to expand, ambiguous wording and typos have crept into contract rules, leading to bizarre settlements. In one instance, Kalshi refused to pay out in full on a bet about a foreign leader leaving office, yet settled a bet on a former president attending an inauguration as a no after the man passed away. In one instance, Kalshi refused to pay out in full on a bet about a foreign leader leaving office, yet settled a bet on a former president attending an inauguration as a no after the man passed away. Traders are already taking their frustration to court over disputed resolutions. Traders are already taking their frustration to court over disputed resolutions. Until these platforms create clear contracts, consult independent experts, and build reliable legal precedents, Wall Street will treat them with caution. Until these platforms create clear contracts, consult independent experts, and build reliable legal precedents, Wall Street will treat them with caution. Prediction markets like to call themselves truth machines. Prediction markets like to call themselves truth machines. But unless they fix their rules, they risk remaining little more than high-stakes digital bookmakers. But unless they fix their rules, they risk remaining little more than high-stakes digital bookmakers. And finally today, while prediction markets are working to rebuild public trust, there is another high-stakes system running quietly in the background that is overdue for a redesign. And finally today, while prediction markets are working to rebuild public trust, there is another high-stakes system running quietly in the background that is overdue for a redesign. It is the invisible airwaves beneath our modern lives, the radio spectrum that carries every mobile phone call, streaming video, and wireless signal across the country. It is the invisible airwaves beneath our modern lives, the radio spectrum that carries every mobile phone call, streaming video, and wireless signal across the country. Right now, America is facing a curious bottleneck. Right now, America is facing a curious bottleneck. We are rapidly approaching the limit of what our commercial wireless networks can handle, yet most of the best airwaves are not available for civilian use at all. We are rapidly approaching the limit of what our commercial wireless networks can handle, yet most of the best airwaves are not available for civilian use at all. In fact, commercial operators only have access to roughly 1/5 to 1/4 of the total spectrum. In fact, commercial operators only have access to roughly 1/5 to 1/4 of the total spectrum. The rest is largely held by federal agencies and the military. The rest is largely held by federal agencies and the military. The heart of the issue lies in what engineers call mid-band spectrum. The heart of the issue lies in what engineers call mid-band spectrum. If you picture radio frequencies as real estate, mid-band is the prime beachfront property. If you picture radio frequencies as real estate, mid-band is the prime beachfront property. The physics of these frequencies make them perfect for moving large volumes of data quickly across decent distances. The physics of these frequencies make them perfect for moving large volumes of data quickly across decent distances. It is what powers modern 5G networks and supports technologies like fixed wireless access, which delivers fast home broadband through the air without digging up streets for cables. It is what powers modern 5G networks and supports technologies like fixed wireless access, which delivers fast home broadband through the air without digging up streets for cables. But while commercial networks are carrying huge amounts of daily traffic, military uses are quite different. But while commercial networks are carrying huge amounts of daily traffic, military uses are quite different. The armed forces need spectrum for radar, signals and sensing equipment, which are vital for national defense, but they simply do not move massive streams of civilian data. The armed forces need spectrum for radar, signals and sensing equipment, which are vital for national defense, but they simply do not move massive streams of civilian data. Keeping those systems on isolated, dedicated bands is turning out to be both costly and restrictive. Keeping those systems on isolated, dedicated bands is turning out to be both costly and restrictive. Other countries have started solving this by turning the traditional model on its head. Other countries have started solving this by turning the traditional model on its head. Allies in Northern Europe, including Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Finland, are adopting what is known as a commercial-first strategy. Allies in Northern Europe, including Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Finland, are adopting what is known as a commercial-first strategy. Instead of building and maintaining separate, expensive military communications hardware, their armed forces take a secure, encrypted slice of existing commercial networks. Instead of building and maintaining separate, expensive military communications hardware, their armed forces take a secure, encrypted slice of existing commercial networks. That means military communications automatically benefit from the speed, software updates, and rapid innovation of private industry, while freeing up valuable airwaves for public use. That means military communications automatically benefit from the speed, software updates, and rapid innovation of private industry, while freeing up valuable airwaves for public use. Because their spectrum is harmonized across borders, military units can communicate seamlessly across neighboring nations. Because their spectrum is harmonized across borders, military units can communicate seamlessly across neighboring nations. There are signs that American policy is beginning to catch up. There are signs that American policy is beginning to catch up. After a period of stasis when auction authority had lapsed, new legislation restored that power and set a plan to bring 800 megahertz of spectrum to auction. After a period of stasis when auction authority had lapsed, new legislation restored that power and set a plan to bring 800 megahertz of spectrum to auction. The Federal Communications Commission has also deployed new software to speed up the process, putting together major auctions for mid-band spectrum far faster than the old timelines that used to stretch over a decade. The Federal Communications Commission has also deployed new software to speed up the process, putting together major auctions for mid-band spectrum far faster than the old timelines that used to stretch over a decade. That is essential ground to cover, especially as the world prepares for the transition to 6G. That is essential ground to cover, especially as the world prepares for the transition to 6G. Ultimately, the choice comes down to how a modern nation thinks about national security and economic growth. Ultimately, the choice comes down to how a modern nation thinks about national security and economic growth. In the 21st century, defence strength relies on technological innovation just as much as hardware, and running isolated systems is becoming harder to justify. In the 21st century, defence strength relies on technological innovation just as much as hardware, and running isolated systems is becoming harder to justify. By relying more on commercial networks, a country can give its military better technology at lower cost while letting civilian innovation thrive on the open airwaves. By relying more on commercial networks, a country can give its military better technology at lower cost while letting civilian innovation thrive on the open airwaves. And with that, we wrap up our commute for today. And with that, we wrap up our commute for today. Thank you for spending part of your morning with the club, and I hope you have a wonderfully productive day ahead. Thank you for spending part of your morning with the club, and I hope you have a wonderfully productive day ahead.